part of that is about unfolding the true nature of our being. And I think when we talk about affirmations, that certainly is one of the key sort of tools to help you do that, because it is unfolding your true nature. For those who don't know, my name is Brian, and I'm actually honored to guide you through this information. We're not just exploring the words, but we're actually going to talk about the tools that help us connect the mind, body, and spirit. You know, let's remember, this isn't like the secret. It's not a quick fix method. I think all of us realize that to change our habits and our behaviors, to use affirmations to create the environment we want around us takes, time and effort and diligence to do that. So just as you think about the things that we talk about today, it's sort of important always to think about how you can commit and incorporate some of those into your life. I would like to start out by just talking about a personal story about affirmations helped me in my own life recently. So to sort of share how it can change your inner world, and when that happens, sort of the world around you. I live in Western North Carolina, one of the areas hit pretty bad by hurricanes. And during that time, you could feel this sadness settled over the community. Even people that didn't have any losses themselves, they just, the empathy and just the sorrow of certain things was really sort of descending like a fog upon, everyone around me and the whole community. And as I looked at that and I thought about Zane, he clearly says despair and sadness are never good emotions. We want to have sympathy, but, they release toxins and chemicals into your body. They're not good for you. They make you stressed and don't think clearly. So I thought of hey, this is a good opportunity to use an affirmation sort of to change the way I'm seeing this and everything around me. So I created an affirmation. The affirmation was, sorry about sort of the nerdiness of it. I will systematically analyze my thoughts and choose the path of victory by inducing hope in myself and others. So that was a simple affirmation I did, and it wasn't just for me, it was for those around me, because all of us as students of the light, we know that part of our mission is to share that light around us. When I started to repeat that affirmation and not like listen to stories about people, and just dwell on the negative, understand it. And when someone actually suffered loss that you were talking to, have sympathy, but then try to turn it to the positive and the hope and what actions we can take to move forward, not being tone deaf. And I would have never done that without that daily use of that affirmation to help me. And I think those around me literally change our inner world, and then see how everyone was pulling together, how resources were coming in, how, nature was just doing what nature sort of does. And, the forest, the little trees now get chances to be big trees. There's a lot of things that happen that are natural too. And then, it allowed us to start taking action, cut trees, work our way out and make progress. So I think I'm not, sharing that story to commend myself, but just to share how affirmations can work in our lives. So, one of the things that we're going to study tonight as we talk about affirmations, we're going to talk about the definition of what an affirmation is. And then we're also going to talk about directed thinking and induced emotions as sort of the way that you empower affirmations. But I think as we do talk about these things, it's always important that what an affirmation is doing is trying to make sure that what is the tensions that you have in your head, the thoughts that are in your consciousness throughout the day and throughout moments are intentional, chosen by you, because at the end of the day, your thoughts and your will, that's the same card. The Magus card is Mercury correspondence, which means thought. And then you have, will. So that tells you a little secret there that Mercury is also the planet that's closest to the sun. So sun is the center of your power. So whatever you're thinking about is directly going to communicate with your center of power to get that to happen. From that standpoint of, Mercury being the closest planet to the sun, which is our ego and our center of power. So what we're thinking about throughout the day, throughout moments, that literally creates the reality around us. So as we talk about that, we're also talk about some of the obstacles. We already touched on that in the beginning, some of those ways to make incorrect affirmations or not follow through, et cetera. And then we'll talk about how to choose an affirmation. I have a little technique I use with the tarot cards. I'll show that to you guys. and then we'll just talk about some things if you want to work this into your life. One of the main things that I'd like to say, though, is, I sometimes bore myself with talking about affirmations. So please ask questions. I'm much better at answering questions than I am giving a big presentation or something. So ask questions. Every slide, I'll pause if there's any questions or comments or insights. Now, what I'd want to start with, study on affirmations. There's a study on affirmations that took 80 undergraduate students, and they tested different affirmations and how they work. They had a control group as always, and then an affirmation group. The control group actually used an affirmation, but they used an affirmation that had a less important personal value to them. So that in our terms, or in the terms of CC Zane, that affirmation didn't have much desire energy attached to it. And then the self-affirmation wrote about a affirmation that was more about something they deeply cared about and wanted to transform. And they had a 30-day challenge with these participants uncovering how they handled these different problems when they were stressed. And what they came up with is that the high stress participants that didn't use a well-developed affirmation had a 50% decline in performance. And then the high stress participants who used it performed at par with low stress participants. So, to unpack that a little bit, it's important that, we realize that Zane tells us, and I think science tells us now, that stress induces negative chemical and emotional states that prevent clear thinking and feeling. So by these participants using an affirmation appropriately, they were able to perform in a very stressful situation at par with people who are experiencing no stress in that situation. So this is one of many stories out there, studies out there about affirmations, and we'll talk about some more as we move on. Any questions or comments thoughts about that? So famous people here, and we have a couple other examples: Jim Carrey, Serena Williams, and Oprah Winfrey, all personally use affirmations. And I think if anyone ever reads any books about men and women who have accomplished great things, huge successes in the world, most of them employing some of the techniques that we're going to talk about today. This is nothing new. Affirmations is an ancient practice that people that always knew that they could use to change the reality themselves and the reality around them. So, okay, what exactly is an affirmation? I like to, I have a little bent towards the mystical. So I like to put things in a certain way that makes me realize how dynamic they are. So for me, an affirmation is a magical spell of transformation. It's using your will to transform something, using the power of induced emotion, directed thinking, and then the invincible will, which are the three things that Zane says, or three other things that Zane says are the most important things for us to develop. Without these three things, you're really hit or miss in your personal work of transformation, and just leaving it up a little bit to just luck of the draw. But with these things, you can actually more consciously transform things. As Zane says, an affirmation, in the sense psychologists and healers employ the term, is a statement of a condition given to the individual by himself or by another, in the manner deemed best suited to reach his unconscious mind, and through suggestion, bring its realization. And as you see there, that realization word also means Scorpio and the sovereign. So that meaning you're basically bringing that through suggestion, and then your desire energy is linking up with that. And those things that we desire, truly desire, get the power to be created. That is, an affirmation is a suggestion that a certain condition is a reality. We're trying to impose our will upon the astral realm to manifest in the physical and spiritual those things that we've consciously decided. Now, like I said, the invincible will brings it to fruition. It is a thing the idea that you have in your conscious mind. It is the fully sort of developed, formulated image of what you want that you directed your thinking to. We'll talk a little bit later about this, but when you're creating affirmation, you're going to create the affirmation of what you want. And then you need to hold that image in your head in your meditative state where you're able to get to your innermost self because you're trying to get that idea to drop as directly as it can in as clear as in as directed as you can, specific as you can into your subconscious, so that then your conscious mind and your subconscious mind make up your soul. So at that point, you've communicated to both aspects of your soul of what you want, and then that's how you affect the change. Now, in order to get that image to actually have the weight it needs, you need to induce emotion. That is the energy that actually empowers that image to create a change in reality. An emotion is something that is more dense in its nature than a thought. So it's more closely related to the physical realm. An emotion is a biochemical sort of reaction in many cases. It involves chemicals and things of that nature. Whereas thought is what we traditionally think about thought is more mercurial in nature. You know, it's air, it's less dense. It's not like water. So in order to get that thought more power in the physical realm, you have to invest that emotion into it. That is the go-between. Just so you have Mercury right next to the sun, and then you have Venus getting that emotion, and the next planet you have is Earth, which is a physical realization of it, the actual change in yourself in this realm that we now live. Now, how does that work? Like I said, you're trying to stimulate your unconscious. We know from affirmations are no longer some mysterious occult thing. They are proven by science to work. And we even understand many of the neuromechanisms, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But what the affirmation does is when you send that message to the subconscious, it takes the old habitual ways that you want to change that have been ingrained. They're called like habit highways, right? It's just easy for your brain to send information that way. It takes less effort. Well, we have to, in order to create the affirmation change, we need to sort of reprogram those highways to go to the land, to the areas we want them to go. We need to rewire the astral connections that we have between our different patterns of our houses, if you want to think about it in that sense. Now, once we change these thoughts, that's when the change happens in the astral, and then goals like health, confidence, prosperity begin to be planted in the physical, as well as any care. We're going to talk about different types of affirmations, but as well as any emotional changes, any character changes, any ways that you're trying to be a better person, or things that in emotional sense and things of that nature. I'll pause to see if there's any questions before we go on to sort of modern science's take on it. All right, I'm boring myself, so somebody better give me a question. So what does modern science say about affirmations? I think we know that Zane was always up on the modern science, and I think he would ask us to do
somebody has a question.
Oh, who has a question? Let's go.
Richard does.
Hey,
Help
Richard.
me understand. On your previous slide, you said an affirmation is kind of like a mini spell.
Right.
Unfortunately, my upbringing, my background for spells is like Walt Disney, and movies that portray witches in a negative light. So how can I associate the word spell with a more neutral or positive meaning? Because I'm thinking of toadstools and witches with warts on their nose. And
that's an excellent question. And that's why I did preface this by saying I have a sort of bent to the mystical and whimsical. But to me, a spell is literally just you deciding in your conscious mind that you want something to happen. And then by programming it and then investing it with energy, it creates change in you and the world around you to hopefully bring that thing to be. There's no involvement of like components or things like physical movements, things like that. So probably is not a right choice of the word. It's just sort of the way I like to think about things because I read so many fantasy books and played too much Dungeons and Dragons.
Brian, RJ has her hand raised.
RJ?
Hey, Brian. I wanted to ask are you going to make the handouts available to us?
If there's a way to do that, I can certainly do that.
That'd be a blessing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Aurelio.
Hey, what's going on, man? I'm loving the class already. Hey, a quick question. Well, one is a response to the gentleman who asked the question or spoke about his upbringing as far as with spells. I'm curious to know if he grew up in like a traditional religious household or something, because if so, we definitely can show you where you was using it inside of that. But for him also, I would recommend book 9 and book 11, course 9 and course 11. They'll do a tremendous job in helping to deal with how it was that he was brought up. For you, Brian, my question is, you spoke about we impose our will, we attempt to impose our will. Do you think it's more so that not that we impose our will, we may try to manifest our will, but we try to connect with it? Because when we go to the astral realm, we got the noun line, and then we got the past, and we got the future which can be alternated. So do you think it's more so we're trying to connect with something, or we're trying to impose them?
I think it would somewhat depends upon, the intention of your affirmation. For me, and also probably a lot on your astral sort of makeup and how you tend to operate. It's sort of like in the mantra when we say, we have dominion over those elements, lower elements of our being. You know what I mean? And you just so submundane particles and things of that nature. I do think about sort of imposing my will. The Magus card is will. So that is what you want to happen. Maybe impose is a tough word. We want to, that future line is not sort of written in stone. So we want to alter that future line, within our environment to conform to what we want. I think it's important though, when we think about that, to understand that it sort of happens within your, certain parameters. You can be born with the best birth chart in the world, but in a small village in the middle of nowhere with not much opportunity. And so, you have to have some realization to the energy that you can have and with the environment around you to sort of what you can create, right? You sort of have to deal with the reality of it. Or Saturn's always going to come around to check on what you think you can do. So, I impose maybe a tough word, but in many cases, I'm sort of trying to say, this is what I want. And my invincible will not be stopped. No matter what obstacles happen, I've desired this change and I'm going to make it happen. When negativity comes up or challenges come up, I'm going to go through them with strength and vigor. And to me, that's imposing my will upon a situation. That's just the way I sort of use that. But thank you for answering the other gentleman's question way better than I could have, as always.
No,
Vicky,
you did great.
Vicky, you have your hand up. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thought I'd unmuted. Would prayer be another way of thinking about a spell? Developing a prayer that might be more compatible for some people.
And honestly, that's sort of the way I do is the prayer to, the creator to more align with his desire, its desire for my own sort of unique soul. So I don't get tied up on, it's just a fun way I think about it. And I actually, the next slide after the one you see on the screen now is about a neuroscience who talks about this, calling it mental training and visualization. So if you want a very there's no associations because of religious or any of those aspects to it, I would call it mental training and visualization. Did you have another question, Richard?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond because someone asked about my religious upbringing. I was raised Mormon. I'm still an active Mormon. I don't have a problem with practicing magic per se, because Mormons practice magic. We don't call it magic, but I mean we lay on hands for the healing of the sick, etc. So I don't have a problem with practicing magic. It's just some of these vocabulary terms just kind of still cause knee-jerk reactions in my system. That's all.
Right. And it's an excellent point. I think, and we'll even talk about with that with the affirmations. You have to sort of use words and things that work for you and resonates and creates the proper image in your head, or you'll sort of have what you were talking about here is an auto suggestion, is when you have one image and another image comes up because of your birth chart and your environment. And so if that's the image that comes up, you don't want to fight that. You want to find the image that works well with that. Hey, Ray.
Good evening, all. Yeah.
Good evening.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to make sure you guys could hear me. I just wanted to say that semantics does play a role in how we perceive and whether or not we're successful in what we're trying to do. So if you take the word spell itself, typically when we want to define a thing or we want to get to the bottom of it, we spell it out, right? And so if you look at it in that light, right, all a spell is spelling out what it is you want. Perhaps that can help to ease the perspective we've been given.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate that a lot. And to be fair, Zane never uses the word spell in his work at all. It was my own flavor. So I'll take it at that. And as you'll see here, if you want to really break it away from any of that kind of woo-woo connotations, we can see here that, like I said, affirmations, the use of affirmations are no longer something that is in that realm only. It is now modern science has really, really sort of proven their usefulness. And here are some of the, mechanisms that work in the body and brain when you use affirmations, particularly about changing yourself. And ultimately that's what changes everything around you is, that when you use affirmations, it actually, like I talked about earlier, it activates neural activations that are sort of related to reward and self-worth. So basically it releases dopamine. As you can see there, the areas of the brain, I'm not a neuroscience, so I'm not going to try to repeat them, but those are the areas of the brain that identify that sort of get activated when you use affirmation properly. And they are associated with pleasure and self-valuation. And we'll talk about that self-valuation in a bit, because that's a big one. Neuroplasticity, that means affirmations just reshape those pathways. Like I said, you're sort of like, if you're trying to be more affable in social situations, but every time you get in a social situation, you get nervous, then we need to create a new road to change that response. And that's what affirmations do. And eventually that'll be your response. It's like changing your habits. Again, the brain mechanisms that are involved in it, the prefrontal cortex, this is where, all the action sort of happens, where you do your directed thinking, your emotions get controlled, and helps override stress response. So as you can see, your directed thinking, basically induced emotion are all happening right there. And then again, dopamine gets released. And then what happens is when you're faced with that situation, you will, once you've repeated an affirmation properly and with enough sort of frequency in that situation, that affirmation will come to mind. And that's what we're trying to get to at the moment where you're having the thoughts that traditionally weren't desired by you and weren't making you they weren't helpful for you in your life. This is where you want that affirmation to come to your head with a clear path, an action plan to sort of do something different. And sort of a modern resource that I can't recommend enough. This gentleman's named Andrew Huberman. He's a neuroscience professor in neurobiology, psychiatry, and behavioral sciences. He has a #1 sort of health-related, wellness-related podcast. And he has a great episode on mental training and visualization. It talks about, neuroplasticity and learning, and how visualization, which is a key component of an affirmation, and repeat it multiple times, changes patterns of behavior. I'm gonna go back to the previous slide to give an example of that. 2 examples about how affirmations to give a real life sort of meaning. Michael Phelps, he would, before the Olympics, he would rehearse in his mind over and over the exact course that he was going to run. He was going to swim. And then in one swim, his goggles fell off and he couldn't see anything, but he actually set the world record in that. And he attributed it to knowing it so many times in his head before he did it that allowed him to do that. And another example of visualization, which is what we're talking about with affirmations, being able to see in your mind what you want to change and create. Nikola Tesla was renowned for being able to create anything that he wanted to build in his brain and manipulate that in ways before he turned it into reality. So that's, that's sort of tangential in a way, but it just shows that what you see in your head and believe you can actually create. Let's talk a little bit about the sort of different types of affirmations. We have, any questions about any of that or any comments? I don't see any hands, nothing in chat. So when we think about different categories of affirmation, we can break it into sort of the 3 parts of our being. We have physical affirmations. Those are things for like healing and strengthening the body, getting better health. I'd even put into that, we know that health and financial stability are sort of both sort of coins, right? Because, your health is very important to you, but also being able to be successful in life are very important. We don't, Zane doesn't prescribe to the fact that, poverty is a moral thing, that we should have resources, and that, the more resources you have, the more ways you can help people. So what I certainly would consider, sort of financial resources, part of the physical realm. And then, we have more astral related affirmations that have to do with your emotional well-being, changing your actual thought cells so that you have better thought patterns that help strengthen relationships and your overall sort of sense of well-being and happiness. And then spiritually, it's for inner peace and fulfillment, sort of align with your belief system, align with the creator, align with however you connect to the divine in a way that you can be better in tune to that. And this is probably where you're not creating an affirmation, to Aurelio's earlier point about imposing your will in this situation. This is more where you're trying to be more, receptive and align yourself and sort of be more connected to the cosmos, to use those types of terms. Now, the affirmations is, that really is a good way to categorize them as you begin to sort of explore the way you would create that affirmation most appropriately for yourself and the astral energies related to you. They also, basically the 12 departments of life really sort of categorize affirmations well. So if you have a certain affirmation that you're wanting to create, and you're one that likes to overanalyze and dig into things like crazy and create the research and create the perfect affirmation, look at your chart. Look at, for that department, what type of words do you need? What type of energy it would, balance and or amplify if it's something that you already are very harmonious in. If it's something you're not harmonious in, what energy would help balance that out? What's the antidote to that? What's the rallying force? Whatever technique is appropriate for that situation to transform that thought from sort of the way it is now, or that department of life, into a better one. The birth charts really help do that. And then again, the success really is sustained attention to to shift those thought cell organizations. So, when you're thinking throughout the day, if you're able to sort of maintain positive thoughts every time you have a moment where your mind drifts to stuff that are just unproductive and don't really add any value, things that aren't that meaningful, that you're not going to actually have any sort of ability to do anything with, your mind drifts back to your affirmation. And then you begin to have that pattern built where you're keeping that and investing that with energy because you're thinking about it. And what your brain thinks about is sort of what it creates. Any questions or thoughts on that? All right, I'm gonna probably get in trouble for this. There is I got a quote from the Bible here, and I use the word spell. Oh no. So, directed thinking is very important. I think I've stressed that enough. Like, what are you thinking about all the time? An affirmation wants to make sure that the image that you have in your conscious mind is the one that you want to make happen in the world. And as much as you're, throughout a day, you have a lot of hours of you thinking about stuff. What are you thinking about? So, the Bible says in Matthew chapter 6, the eye is a lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body would be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body would be full of darkness. If the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. Now, he's talking about money here, but at the end of the day, what this is saying is like what you're seeing all day and what you're thinking about all day is what fuels your soul. So, the thoughts that you're habitually thinking about all the different departments of life and those things in your own life, in the totality of your life, that is what you're going to be serving. That's what you're going to be creating. And if what you're thinking about all day long is not something that you really, when you have moments of calm reflection, have decided you want into your life, then you're creating other than what you've decided in the moments. It's like committing I hate to use this term, but it works well for me. Like, how many people, say they're going to start exercising and they sit around all day thinking about how much they hate exercising, and then they never develop the habit of exercising. That's sort of like it is. If whatever you're thinking about when you think about this thing, that's what's going to be created. Now, how does that work? Because what you have in your mind is what your desire energy is being released towards. And if it's the image, not the suggestion itself, that releases desire energy. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But if you make a suggestion, and that, like, say you say, I want to be able to have the resources to provide for my family. I don't know, that's a good one, right? So, but then when you think about that, you think about how much you hate your boss and how your job's a dead end job. Then that's what you're going to tell your unconscious that you think about that situation. So that's where you have to really make sure that you're creating the right auto sort of image in your head when you use the affirmation. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail later. All right. Again, let's keep talking about it, but is the attention is what you're thinking about that creates it. The next thing any thoughts on that before we talk about sort of how to get the emotions involved in it, now that we sort of know what we want to accomplish? When you think about that emotional sort of process when you create the affirmation, so how exactly are we working here? So, whatever techniques you have to sort of calm yourself down and relax, let's say you've already created the affirmation, whatever techniques you have to calm yourself down and relax, you would sort of use those. And then when you get into that relaxed state, you will say your affirmation. And as you say the affirmation, you will say it slowly and with intention, using what is using whatever images you can to accompany the words. I'm not someone that has a lot of visual images in per se. I can't create a complex sort of like scene in my head. So for me, that would mean like when I'm using it, I'm thinking about sometimes if I say the word like system, then I'll see the sign for Saturn in my head. If I'm using the word affection, then I'll see the sign for Venus in my head. So that's sort of the way that, I'll pause on each word, and any word that has meaning is a heavy word. I'll let my emotions and use that sign to sort of tap into that energy and try to feel that emotion with the word. And, when we think about inducing emotion, one of Zane's direct suggestions is that we create a chart with all the emotions that we want in our life, right? Joy, happiness, being confident, being devotional, being angry, and that you have an image related to that that can invoke that emotion or induce that emotion with you. And this is something that is another scientific thing. They call it emotional regulation or emotion-focused intention. And that is the deliberate management and guidance of one's emotional states to achieve specific goals of well-being. This concept has gained attention in psychology, neuroscience, and even spiritual practices as researchers and practitioners explore how emotions can be intentionally directed to enhance mental health, social relationships, and personal growth. And I have an overview of a meta-analysis of it that has hundreds of studies backing that up. It's as simple as they can flash a screen of a baby laughing, and people will feel happy. They can measure it, and they can, flash a screen of something of politics on the screen, and people feel angry, and they can measure it. So, even a smiley, like even emojis, there's a reason they're called emojis. Those little emojis trigger a reaction in you. But as those called to be conscious of our actions, we want to be able to do that when we need to. When we're going into a situation, we need to be joyful. We need to be able to sit down, think about images of joy, and try to activate joy within us. That's inducing emotions. And so when we think about that and doing that in our affirmational state, the three powerhouses that Zane talks about, and all this information is from chapter 5, course 8, in terms of Zane's concepts. So I'd recommend, it's called The Correct Use of Affirmations. I'd recommend that you read that chapter. It's really, really good. But he talks about, the three drives being the powerhouses. So when you're thinking about your affirmation and how to tune it so that it really makes you want that thing, the drives are the core powerhouses to do that. So where we have the most energy in us, and that's a drive for significance, the drive for nutritive. So that's finances, safety, things of that nature, significance, self-worth, accomplishing something in life, being proud of who you are, being the person that you want to be, not who you were made because of everything before you had any decision in it. Those things. And then reproduction. That's not just physical, it's being a creator, adding something, finding your cosmic job, and bringing the power of the creator through you in your own unique way while you were called into existence as a soul, manifesting that as well. That's the higher plane to wanting to have, children and all that, which is a beautiful thing and is an important drive to have as well. It's important that when you use affirmations and releasing the proper energy, that you don't use negative phrasing. You don't say, "I won't overeat," because that really brings to your attention the negative aspect of it. Instead, you want to focus on affirmations that lead to direct the energy effectively. And then the last thing on the slide before I take your questions is I talked about a little earlier, personalizing the affirmations using your birth chart. Again, when you say, okay, I want to change my health habits. You look to your birth chart, to your health, and then your physical body, those things. You see where your energies are, and then you sort of, decide how you need to, work with those energies to make sure it resonates with you to make that change. It's always good to, one of the most important things is if, the prayer of a righteous person is a very powerful thing, and the righteousness just means that you have faith. So, if you have spiritual beliefs that devotional energy, Zane talks about it over and over, is right up there with the three drives in terms of the power to create change and to create an emotional state to connect most directly and receive assistance from things beyond yourself to make that happen. It does, you know, it connects you to your higher purpose and divine support. So that's a very powerful way to make, to Vicky's earlier point, your affirmation of prayer. I see someone in chat. I can't read that yet. I don't know. Let's see chat. Peg, can you read that in chat? I won't.
No, it's not a question for you.
Okay. Relio, did you have a question? I saw your hand up for a moment.
Yeah. Do you well, one, let me clarify. I wasn't suggesting that we don't impose our will. I think that's paramount to us being a ruler and a ruler and a lord over our domain. You know, we have to impose our will, but we impose our my statement was, are we imposing our will on the universe, or are we connecting with the universe and utilizing our astral energy to impose our will, you know, on the slower realms? But to the affirmations, do you use do you like determine which thought cell or which thought family that the subject matter belong to, and do you use the metals, the different metals from the various planets in creating the affirmations that you use?
Excellent question. And as far as I don't, I mean, I know my birth chart, so I sort of know what works for me. I'll share the method that I use to create affirmations, and it's more utilizing the tarot cards and the positive attributes associated with each astrological force. It's a simple method I use to get sort of the right words that, and then I'll phrase them up in a way that works. I know, and this is another sort of self-admittance. Astrology isn't necessarily what I'm called to get my PhD in. So I don't lean on astrology as much as most of the members here do. And that's just a self-admittance on my part. But it is something that Zane definitely suggests doing. So I felt that I needed to highlight that it's not something that I personally do a lot of, beyond using my own birth chart and looking at people's and looking at time frame. Well, I'll talk about it, but mainly I use the astrological charts to look for positive astrodynes to when to really begin or use that affirmation. You know, when there's huge astrodynes, I really don't necessarily look for, and houses are not as much because it's really hard to find that. I just look for a lot of energy, and I'll sort of I'll create my affirmations or begin them at that time. All right, for beware of autosuggestion, Zane has a whole segment on this. Basically, autosuggestions is what I've alluded to earlier, are those things that, you know, the unintended images that arise when you think about a certain thing. You know, for example, if you want to, you know, if when you think about going to a party, you know, this is something that I'm not the most social person. And so when I think about going to a party or doing something like that, in many cases I feel nervous, right? And I can't be my best self when I'm nervous. I can't be the person that I want to be, right? This is about, a lot of this work is about changing our character because that's what we're taking with us. So, the alternative approach, I might say, okay, in social situations, I'm alert to feeling nervous and respond with a prepared funny story. So, that situation, when I've repeated that affirmation enough, when I get to a situation where normally I'd be, a little nervous, I always have this story that I know good, right? That I can tell that story and it always gets a laugh. And then, it sort of makes me connect, with the person. And then at that point, I feel, so that would be a way that, now if I would have said, I'm the life of a party when I go to a party, as soon as I thought about that, the only images that would have recurred in my head is how I get nervous when I go somewhere. So that's what an auto-suggestion is. It's when you think about one thing, like if you say, when you say, for example, I'm going to use very concrete terms. I want to go to the gym every day. And every time you think about that, you think about how bad you hate going to the gym. You know, that's the same kind of thing. You know, I don't, you know, I want to eat more healthy. And you're like, oh my God, in your brain, you think I'm not going to get Oreos. That's, you can tell what I like. That's what happens. You know, that's the auto suggestion. So how do we sort of, as we think about using our affirmation and we're going to sort of begin to incorporate in our life, you know, the way we sort of detect those auto suggestions is in a relaxed state. You know, just get as relaxed as you can, whatever way you do. Get devotional, works great. And then, you know, say that affirmation and then see what's the first thing that sort of comes to your head after that. You know, so some free association. That can be some, what thoughts come up with that. That can, not trying to direct them, not trying to make the affirmation reality, but just see what comes up. And that will, or the feeling that you feel, there's, for those that are more emotive than me, the feeling that comes up, right? I think in sort of words, the feelings that come up, you know, when you, if you're more of that kind of person, and that will give you an indication to whether that affirmation is going to be successful or not, because that's how your subconscious is reading that affirmation. When you say this and your subconscious reads it, that's what the subconscious thinks. That's what it's going to be, sort of desire energy is going to be released towards that, because that's what your subconscious is interpreting that affirmation as. So this is too deep or whatever. I'm sorry, but so that's what Zane's saying with that. And then you adjust it. I'm gonna move on here so we can get to make sure we get through everything. I don't want to hold you guys late, but there are any questions here? All right. And, you know, so when we think about, Aurelio, do you have a question or comment?
No, all right. If you're gonna get to it later, then we can get to it later. But if not, so my question, like the example that you gave about when you got ready to do a like a party or something, man, and you'll have a pre-planned way of dealing with it, right? Come up with a joke or say something funny or something like that, right? So for me, that sounds like you're using induced emotion right there, which is a necessary element in order to create anything on the astral world. But what I want to ask about is sublimation, right? So when you're talking about the auto suggestions, what part, or have you looked into what part sublimation plays in alleviating?
Your question is too advanced for me. We explained, refresh my memory on what the chemical component of sublimation is, and then I could probably answer it better.
So, and it's in course 5 as well, but I really would like to hear somebody else's take on it, you know. But sublimation is just like if you have something traumatic, or if you have a bad experience, or if you have anything, instead of trying to avoid it, you create it in a way somewhat that you would create an affirmation, but you create it in a way to pretty much train yourself, train your astral self to reprocess it different, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And yeah, perfect sense. And, you know, and for the psychological or the sort of way that some of the neurosciences talk about that, which is sort of how I can relate to it, is basically reframing that, right? You know, something happened to you and when you were sort of traumatic, and, you know, stepping out of that situation and analyzing like a dear friend or something and seeing it from all its angles, and then understanding how it's made you to where you are now, you know, and where you are in your spiritual path. And if you would not gotten there without that thing, you know, an affirmation can certainly help you learn to reframe that. And that is a lot of what they're talking about on a very sort of minor level. But it is important, I think, to note, and we don't probably talk about it enough, that it's clear that our environment has a 50% impact on us as well. So, Zane talks about that. So we tend to focus on the birth chart a lot, and that's important. But just as important are the things that happen to you in your life, and what that does to your psychology. And it sort of actually leads to our next slide. So I appreciate that, is complexes. And that's when we have groups of emotionally charged thoughts that have similar tones, but they have too much emotion associated with them. Some common ones are jobs, your health. You've had a health situation. You know, if you you've always struggled with jobs. Politics seems to be a complex that America has right now. And then relationships, right? If every time you talk about a relationship, you get worked up and emotional. So the easy way to think about and this was the simplest thing when I read it, was like, think about those things that if someone talks to you about them, you get very touchy. You know, if you bring up something to someone who you can have all the conversation in the world around them, but if you bring up their job and they start bitching and hating and all this, you know, they just shows you, is a good example of the things that you may have complexes around, those things that sort of trigger you too much. You know, those things when you think about them, you get a pit in your stomach or whatever. That is, those are your complexes. You know, some of the most significant complexes that are out there are the inferiority complex and superiority complex. Zane covers that. I think in the space of people who are really attracted to things that change their life, you know, these two complexes are very devastating. You know, the inferiority, if you don't think that you can ever change anything, that you're a victim, that, you have these thoughts of superiority, you think you're, but then, you know, you're always sort of getting beat down, and what you think you can do, you never can do. Then you get the complex that you're a victim. The other one is where maybe your mother told you too many times that you could do everything perfectly, and then you grow up thinking everything you do is perfect, as example Zane uses. And so you have unrealistic expectations. So you think you can do anything. You know, you probably met people, oh, I can do that. They don't even realize it when they're not doing it well. But this can also lead to the same thing as a victim complex, where you have a sort of a persecution complex. It's like, oh, man, I'm great, but everybody around me is messed up. And those two things result from your drive from significance. So if you have those complexes, and I would say probably everyone has one or the other to a greater or lesser degree. I fall into one of the categories for sure. So, you need to recognize that and have an honest assessment of sort of who you are in order to really begin to make affirmations, because you do need to understand there is this real world that we live in that's pushing against you in some ways. So, having a good sort of, Zane talks about having a good objective understanding of your strengths and your weaknesses, and being, know thyself, is, and if you have these complexes, since they're attached to your drive to significance, there's so much emotional energy tied to them that it's really hard to be clearly analytical. And of course, the three drives are, that come into play here: safety, significance, and reproduction. We talked about those earlier. Okay, so now that we need to create affirmations, like I said, reflect on your experiences, think about your own life and the thing that you're trying to change, how your own life's past experience can be an obstacle to making that happen. Also, use Zane's methods. Look at your birth chart. Use astrological energy. And, for those that are attuned to it, use your lunar and solar sort of cycles, especially the lunar ones every month as they transit your houses. Use some of that energy. I know it's not the most powerful in the world, but it does happen, and you can always depend on those transits to your birth chart from the moon. So, look to those, or even from Mercury. Some things like that to where it really helps you in your own birth chart sort of get a little extra juice, you know what I mean, to help that out, because that can make all the difference in the world. And that's aligning with the natural cycles. Make them specific and relevant to your personal journey, fostering, emotional connection and commitment. Like I said, that early on, that the studies show and Zane talks about, when there's something that you care deeply about, is the ones that really can help you a lot. How do I create affirmations? I have a chart here. If you look through, I don't remember what book it is, but Zane talks about all the best qualities that each sign has. So I say, well, you know what? I just want to bring in the best qualities of the sign. There's a bad quality that goes along with these too. I don't want the bad qualities. I want the good qualities. So this is what I use, a chart, to sort of decode my tarot reading. So I would just lay 5 cards. I'll do my shuffle. I'll lay 5 cards out. And then based on the symbols on those cards, I will put the positive attribute of that zodiac force down. So for example, on these cards, it's a little hard to see, but I think it's Taurus at the top for that decadent. And at the bottom is Venus. So I put stability, affection. The next card is the moon card, is a sign on that. And I know that's not the card, but the moon is the planet that rules that card. So I'll put adaptability for the best positive, the moon. But since I know that, since that's a major card, I will put sort of its meaning. So I know that the bad part of that card is deception. You know, so what's a card mean? So you have to watch for secret foes and deception for that card. And the next card is Leo. So I put kindness. And the next card, if you look, the two top ones are, I think, Capricorn and Pisces. That's resourcefulness and sympathy are the best attributes of those signs. And then the bottom card is the bottom sign on the bottom of the card, which I see as sort of a key to, if that card comes up, that's sort of to me the solution, is spirituality. And then the last card, and this just like this was done as a, because I know a lot of people like finances. So this was just done to do finances, to help an affirmation on finances. And the last card that come up wasn't planned, but it was a good sign, was the change of fortune. So, and that card is originality, is what it means, being ruled by Uranus there. So then I'll take those words and I'll sit and sort of write an affirmation using those words. And so in this case, the affirmation I came up with is, I maintain emotional stability towards financial success, transforming deceptive thoughts into kindness when acquiring resources. I use my resources productively, and by acting with sympathy and spirituality, I foster originality that changes my fortune. That's very academic, you know, in a certain sense. That's sort of what works for me. I'm not telling you to do anything to do this, but like I said earlier, you know, you need to find the method that works well for you, using birth charts, using any sort of self-analysis you've done yourself, any therapy you've been in about your known issues, use all, you know, what caused them, how to overcome them. You know, if you're working with your finances, but you've never been successful, you know, why haven't you worked through that? Create that, whatever that solution is in your affirmation. Because at the end of the day, what study after study after study shows, and spiritual text after spiritual text shows, that the affirmation must be followed up with action. You know, you must begin to do things with yourself in order to create those changes. If your affirmations must to be happy, you have to go out into the world and smile and connect with people and let that affirmation have an environment where it can manifest. If you want to have financial resources in your house, but all you do is sit and think about that, thinking is not action. You must, you know, take those next steps down the road, get some Mars energy, have some initiative and go out there and do something with that affirmation. I know this is sort of complicated, but I wanted to share that once you sort of do all this, a big part of it is Zane talks about some people can take an affirmation from someone else and that works perfectly for them. It's actually the best thing. They say, just you do that and give me the affirmation. Other people, you can't tell them anything. I'm one of those, you can't tell me anything. So this is what I do to convince myself that this affirmation is going to work, because doing all that work to create the affirmation for me gets my will, my conscious thought fully engaged in that. And for me, that's my meditative practice, is through thinking directly about things. So that is how I sort of access my inner self. So that works for me. Other people can do it different ways, but I thought it'd be good to share this. Any questions? Or Aurelio, my favorite guy, thank you for having questions. I really, really appreciate it.
Right. Hey, so you do have Gemini strong, right?
I do. Yes, this is my strongest
All
sign.
right. So when you say what your methods are that works best for you, that fits your sun, right? And so
Yeah.
the sun is, even when we speak about the three desires, right? All of those are still based off of the sun. you know, so that's the metal gold, you know. So you are actually using the astrology, even in using the tarot, you are actually using the astrology, but just in a less conscious way of the terminology and exactly how it is that you're using. For
Thank
the
you for that.
gentleman, for the gentleman earlier who stated that he grew up Mormon and was talking about this, you know, the spells and the issues and everything with the spells as well. Well, I didn't grow up Mormon. I am a part of the I am currently a Mormon, you know, and a part of that body as well. And for him, I would say that everything that we use, and he probably would understand this more than anybody else, but everything that we use here in the Church of Light, you know, with the astrology, with the tarot, you know, with all of these hermetic arts and sciences, it's the same thing that you grew up using, right? Like even when you went to, if you got your patriarchal blessing, you know, you using those energies, you know, when you if you've been to the temple and you dealing with the three lights and the three levels and things of that nature, you actually are using the sciences and everything that we use. And a case in point for you, while this is not affirmation, but it's speaking towards the onus that's put on terms like spells and things of that nature. Think about it. When we talk about the Bible and religion, we call it the gospel, you know, Gospel. So that's the central core of it. And the rituals and all of those things have their parts that they play in helping materialize it. But everything with the impressions that the elders get and things of that nature, you know, even going back to right before COVID hit, you know, right before that, the last speech that the president gave there was about switching everything to the internet, and they changed all the way that the missionaries work. So all of that is still, you know, involved in these particular sciences and actually using these sciences. The difference here is we take the covers all the way off and call everything by its name.
Thank you for that, Aurelio. Thanks a lot. I agree 100%.
Brian, I wonder if you have more to the presentation. I'd like to share a couple of anecdotes, but I want to wait until you're done with what you have to say.
Perfect. I'm wrapping it up right now, Paul.
Okay.
The last slide here. So, you know, if I was in this class and this resonated with me, you know, to Aurelio's point, I'm strongly Gemini. I had the Sun, Mercury, and Saturn in Gemini. So I like to try to systematize, and I can spend all day trying to categorize my thoughts. There's nothing I enjoy more than creating a system. I love it. But here you'll see the first thing is a 30-day commitment. And this is very important is, you know, once you have your affirmation, you know, looking at your birth chart and environment using tarot cards or whatever systems you use to sort of help you attune to the cosmic forces, it's important that you memorize it. I cannot stress this enough. And I know a lot of people hate memorizing stuff. I don't think any of us probably do actually. But, you know, there's no way that you can bring something to your conscious mind in a situation of stress or whatever if you don't have that in your conscious mind to bring it forth. You can't pull the paper out at the moment and read it. You know, the ancient Greeks, they didn't believe that you knew a book until you memorized it in some cases. You know, that's when you have access to it. In this world of AI and having all these things to do all our solutions for us, we're in danger of not realizing that we need these things in our conscious mind. We don't take AI with us. You know what I'm saying? So you need to memorize it. Well, I don't know. I can't actually, I'll take that back. I have no idea what we, in terms of that, the machines that are there, but memorize it. It's very important. We talked about using astrological forces, but also, you know, that no man's land between waking and sleeping, that's a very precious time period to really use to tune your consciousness to your subconsciousness and get those affirmations into your subconscious. So, and what you'll find is right when, once you worked on the affirmation for a week or so, when you wake up, that will be your first thought when you wake up, is that affirmation. So that's very powerful. And then the last thought. So repeat it upon waking and before bed. And if you want to be super A+ student, do it at solar noon as well, or as close to it as you can to get that energy there. Then, use direct to thinking when you do that affirmation, to hold the attention on the image and the words. Really do that. Try to empower it with the feelings that you've associated are going to be beneficial, devotional. If that's your sort of powerhouse, use that. Do try to sort of time the starting and finishing of these around your solar lunar cycles. Use astrodynes for additional juice. And then, like I said, stick with it for 30 days. I think many people that I work with to sort of help do some stuff, they get an A+ and sort of wanting it, and a D in the discipline to do it. Again, I have Saturn and I'm friends with it. So it comes easier to some people than others. But if you decide to do it, do it. There's nothing that defeats developing an invincible will like making a decision and not following through with it. So you have to follow. If you decide to do it, follow through with it. I see your hand, Richard. I'll let Paul add something here first since it's in queue, and we'll get back to you.
It's a story in my own life. When I was studying this material back in the 1980s, I had, I went through a divorce after an 8-year marriage. I went bankrupt. I got unemployed, and I ended association with the spiritual path that I'd followed for the previous 12 years. And I was 30 days away from living in the street. And I was trying to find an affirmation that I believed.
To be hard.
I'll just be really frank. After the marriage, my first girlfriend, I had performance problems. So if you want the whole set of disaster for a middle-aged man,
that's all the drives were messed up.
I tried everything, and what I came up with that I had to be something that I believed, and I had all this stuff and it was, there's something I can do today to improve my health.
There you go.
Yeah.
Make it easy on yourself.
Very quickly, within 2 weeks, it was, my health is improving day by day with small steps. And it evolved in that way. And I can tell you, there's a 6-week period there. At the end of that 6-week period, I did some planning, and I constructed what's my whole career now came out of that. But it started with that little one. So I'm another one. I train healers, right? And any honest healer, when they come and sit with the person to be healed, they experience what's called imposter syndrome. Right?
Yeah.
I'm an imposter. I'm not really qualified to do this. This is a complex, right? But I've never met an honest healer. 30, 40 years practice. I've been doing this 50 years. Before every client, I have imposter syndrome, and I had to evolve something. And we talk to our students about evolving this, and I say, why am I doing this? They go, why am I doing this? I'd rather go for a walk in the woods. And I go, why am I doing it? Number one, it's my calling.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. That takes care of the significance, which I believe it's my calling. Number two, I have a lot of training in this area. Right. So I relax, and now I have access to training, right? And then finally, this, just like the thing I did for myself, there's something I can do today for this client to help them improve their health. I may not be able to cure solve their problems, okay? All right. And the last thing I want to tell is a story. This was a close friend of mine, and he was, he and his wife were having financial trouble, and they were in this one neighborhood here in Portland, and they were crossing the street, and a blue pickup truck didn't stop properly at a stop sign and injured her arm. And there was a settlement there, which was enough money for them to pay off their mortgage. Right? Okay, so it's 2 or 3 years later, and they're having some other problems now, right? And they're attended a seminar, one of these groups, positive thinking, like Esther, I don't know the four, I don't know what they call them, and they came out. Oh, and they were doing this. This will happen. This will come. This will come, and everything. And I tell you, I'm not kidding you. They were in the same neighborhood, not the same street, same neighborhood, and a blue pickup truck came and injured her. But she was standing about 10 steps outside of the sidewalk, outside of the crosswalk. So she wasn't entitled to any compensation at all.
Oh my goodness.
As these are the occultists hears about one of these once in their lifetime or something, but they actually manifested this disaster by trying to force something to happen.
Thank you, Paul. 2 important points that I meant to mention earlier with that is, start simple, like deal with what you can only believe for what you can believe for. There's a reality, that's why those drives for superiority and inferiority are listed. You got to be honest with yourself about the affirmation. And number 2, when it comes to sort of trying to do affirmations that aren't necessarily, that are more negative in nature, maybe where other people are suffering, or you're taking advantage of people, or trying to manipulate things involving other people in a direct way, that tends to go down attracting the wrong forces in your life. You're gonna, I can speak for personal experience. We all have different spiritual paths to get where we are. That's not a fun place to be, that's the coercive part of Pluto, right? I mean, it's not the spirituality. So we don't want to be an adept using the coercive part of Pluto. I want to make sure that our affirmations are uplifting and are towards positive things and are in line with things that are appropriate. Because if not, you're, as Zane says, you're dealing with crooks and thieves out there. That's what you're going for. And you better be the best gangster on the block. But I did list here, certainly I could take any more questions. But if you want any information, I don't know if we can email this out because we really don't get a list of names like that. But I will see if I'll post this on YouTube, and I'll see if I can post the documents there, if I can figure out how to do that. But if you do email, if you want any more information, or if you even if you want an affirmation, I'll send you one. If that helps you out in any way. You can just email Church of Light at light.org, and we can get you the deck for sure. If not, we'll try to post it to the YouTube. But if you do have any questions or comments or anything that you were too shy to ask, certainly email that, and we'll be glad to get back to you. I want to make sure we're all in this together. I learned so much talking to you guys. So any question you ask will probably make me do a little Saturn research and see what I can come up with. Hey, Richard, did you have something?
Yeah, Brian, we'll also have it posted on the student page.
Okay.
At light.org, and that one will definitely have a copy of your deck. If you would send it to me, please.
Perfect. I will.
I'll make sure that gets on there.
It's a big deck, so I'll see if I figure out how I can send it to you.
Zip.
Yeah, Brian.
My hand was up. Can I say something?
Sure. I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Apologize.
That's okay. Brian, thank you for having this. And I've had such a hectic week. I got my time wrong. So I was thinking Central Standard Time. So I got in here a little bit late. So I definitely want to get the beginning of this, and I'll send my email to light.org. I was a member of the Church of Light many years ago, and I'm still going to finish the books. I'm like on 16, but I wanted to also pass on something. I love this title you're doing tonight, Affirmation. This is how to really be responsible to help bring something into your life that you feel is worth having. And when I was at the Unity Church years ago, they had a thing to help, because they believe also strongly in affirmations. And it was like, believe. The first thing is you have to believe you can have it, because if you can't really believe it, it can't really be there. And the next is to affirm it and deny lack, thank, and then release it. But the most important thing is that when you are affirming it, you are affirming that it's already there in your life. It's already there, and you need to feel it like it's already happened. That helps pull it to you and attract it to you. So that was all I wanted to say. And that was probably part of your earlier talk of what you said. I just wasn't here, and I am so sorry. But I just wanted to say that, and I hope I'm not being disruptive. Thank you.
Not at all. Thank you for that responsible part. That's in being cognizant of what your level of faith is. The star card means faith, hope, and truth, right? There's a faith there, but there's hope and there's truth. It's like, what is your actual capabilities at that moment? What are your environmental limitations? I want to give $1 billion to poor people. Okay, how could that actually, you know what I mean? Where I'm at in my life, is that actual something feasible for me to, believe or not? Don't be limited, because at the end of the day, what you didn't do is that what you didn't do. But be cognizant. And I think starting simple, Zane talks about that when you're developing that will to, and creating a small affirmation will make you be able to believe for bigger things. And so each step of the way is building that muscle, just like learning an alphabet. You're getting more and more confident, learning, how to put better words together. And so when you're building the invincible will, Zane's very, very adamant that you start with things you can sort of be successful with, and keep it simple that way.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Audra.
So Brian, this is Richard.
Hey, Richard.
So all I wanted to say was to build on to something that you had said earlier about, I forget how you phrased it, but that zone between being asleep and being awake.
Yep.
I have noticed that if God or the universe wants to get in touch with me, the way that happens is either in my dreams or the first thoughts I have when I first wake up. And because that's when the universe can get my full undivided attention. Otherwise, all bets are off. Other people may have a different gift, but that's my gift is dreams or the thoughts that come into my mind when I first wake up. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's very important that we share those things that work for us, so that other people can relate and reinforce that these things are real. So thank you for sharing that. And it does actually talk about in the science, I didn't bring this up, but having adequate sleep was a key to making an affirmation work. Being well rested, being physically sort of, in a good spot is important. But, another thing about that, and then we can wrap up, but, think about, and I know this is people in this call suffer from this. I used to suffer from this, not being able to fall asleep because you're thinking about all your problems. Like that's not a good place to be, right? Because then that's the last thoughts that's in your sort of mind and being sent to your subconscious. So an affirmation is a simple one. If that's something that is bothering you, one of the first steps would be to create an affirmation, so that when you go to bed, you can have a peaceful, restorative night to sleep and allow the proper sort of mental processes to happen, so that you can receive and live better. So if you're having struggles when you fall asleep with negative spins, that'd be something that I would look at creating affirmations towards, because that's really devastating to your sort of psyche. There are habits where they say you should sort of reflect on your day before you fall asleep and sort of see points where you became unconscious or your attention was directed other than where you want, of occult method. So something useful. I will mention, if you enjoyed this class and you want to help others do things like this, consider donating. On the website, you can see that. And, just a reminder, we have our Sunday service next Sunday. Ooh, I put a wrong thing in there. I think it's next Sunday.
It's
this Sunday.
Coming Sunday.
Yeah.
Oh,
I will be speaking on that one too. So I don't know if that helps you want to go or not. So.
Yvette, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Brian. I used to go to bed thinking about all the things that could possibly go wrong. But it makes me nervous if I don't. So I decided to do one time, think of things that might go wrong, what I could have a solution for, and then stop thinking about it and then do more positive affirmations. and not worry about it. But at least I prepared because I have a strong
Right.
Saturn. You know, I needed to do that, but I don't need to focus on that all the time. Just do
Right.
it once, move on, positive affirmations. It gets better.
Yeah.
Wanted to say that.
No, it's important. I think for those of us that have a more positive relationship with Saturn, I'm sort of the Saturn defender. I'm out there. I'm not like people slander Saturn. It's very respectful if you've done the work, but you know, the opposite to fear is a system, right? If you fear being unhealthy, do everything you know that you can to, you know, counteract that, and, you know, or whatever the problem is, you know, don't just let the fear overwhelm you. Actually sort of do some work to get, you know, if you have a problem with your finances, do a budget, you know, that kind of thing helps a lot. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you guys for listening to me for an hour or so. Like I said, sometimes I get bored of myself talking, so I appreciate you guys sticking with me. And I hope this class, truly, truly hope that you guys got something out of this class and it helps you transform yourself into the person that you want to be. Peg, I'll turn it over to you.